Everyone needs to understand that the success you have, whether it's in business, whether it's in life, whether it's happiness, truly boils down to the power and level and depthness of your relationships. And I think that's the power of relationship building. It's treating people like humans that you actually care about and investing them in a way that then when you do need to leverage that relationship for something that benefits you, you can. You have the permission.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Keynote Curators Podcast. I'm Seth Deckman, your Keynote Curator. And today we're calling bullshit. That's right, BS on surface level success. We're going to dive into what relationships really mean for your success in life with our guest, Barb Betts. Barb, welcome to the podcast.
I am so happy to be here, Seth. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're excited too. I came out pretty strong with some scatological language, which is open season here on the Keynote Curators. Relationship skills are the only skills, Barb, the only skills, or the first skills from which everything else stems. Talk to me about that.
Well, you said it. What I wish people understood is that, I kind of have a new mantra that I'm working on, that I'm noodling on in my head. And it basically says, show me your success and I'll tell you the level of your relationships, right? Like at the end of the day, everyone needs to understand that the success you have, whether it's in business, whether it's in life, whether it's happiness, truly boils down to the power and level and depthness of your relationships. It all comes down to relationships and in the container of three-way: relationships with ourselves, relationships with others, and then relationships in business.
Yeah. We hear it ad nauseum. In fact, I think the zeitgeist, what's circulating in society right now is relationships is over-indexing, I believe. It's always been important. It's always been talked about. But with social media, isolation, loneliness, mental health challenges, relationships has been a vehicle or talked about as a way to mitigate that, heal that, not necessarily be a cure-all or a magic bullet, but it can be spoken about ad nauseum. Talk to us about, for the everyday person on our podcast, and hello to our listeners, by the way. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for joining us for the first time. Love us, like us, as always. Comment on where you see your challenges in relationships or where they've been a source for great success for you. Dial us into how you define it.
That's interesting. It's an interesting question because here's where I think we get it wrong. Before I even define it, we get it wrong in taking our relationships for granted. I think at the end of the day, everyone knows, you said it, everyone knows it's about relationships. Like I always say, at the end of every book, at the end of every keynote I've heard, maybe not every keynote, but a lot of keynotes I've heard, messages, blog posts, social media content, someone's teaching you a gimmick, someone's teaching you a strategy, someone's teaching you a dialogue, they're teaching you the get rich quick scheme, right? The thing everybody wants. And then typically they'll say at the end of that statement, but at the end of the day, it's really all about relationships, right? So I always say, I'm not telling anybody something that they don't already know. The problem is we take them for granted. The problem is that we don't understand what a real relationship is, to your original question. And in my opinion, a real relationship is one that's built on authenticity, vulnerability, trust, those tangible things that you can't put a dollar amount or value on, right?
Yeah.
You have a relationship when you have a relationship. And you also know when you really don't have a relationship that you want, or you think you have that relationship that you really don't have.
Yeah. It seems like, correct me here when I'm wrong, if somebody trusts you, which is part of what you just said, they're going to connect and tell you things that are meaningful and important to them. It doesn't have to be sitting down Indian style and, cross-legged and braiding our hair and telling our deepest, darkest secrets. But on the inverse, if you trust them and respect them, you'll do the same. I think, it strikes me as relationships, again, in the zeitgeist, while it's over indexing in the frame of loneliness and isolation and negative impact of social media, among other things, diet, the stresses of work, all the messes and stresses of life, is that it can be transactional, and that it's a vehicle to an end, to get something. How do you thread that needle? How do you tell the difference? Because honestly, I'm in sales. I run a business. I have people that I work with, that work for me, that my buyers and clients that I work for. And there is a transaction involved, but I do have friendships as well.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, so the way I describe that is that you truly have a level of relationship with everyone that you know, and it's okay to have a different level of relationship with everyone you know. That's truly the foundational principle, is that you absolutely are gonna have deeper relationships in all aspects of your life, right? You have friends that you're closer to versus acquaintances. You have people that you work with in the keynote speaking world, right? You have clients that you have a better relationship with than others. It doesn't mean you don't have a relationship with the other ones that maybe you only transact business every 6 months or you only talk to once in a while, but you still have a level of relationship with them, right? And this transpires into the speakers that you work with, right? You are closer to some speakers than others, which is why I try to explain and teach to people part of the issue in this relationship building world when I teach people how to actually build real relationships is the first thing you have to start with is figuring out what level of relationship you have with everyone that you know.
Yeah.
And you can't have the same level of relationship with everybody. Otherwise, you've got a stagnant status quo life
Yeah.
because you're
And
treating everyone the same.
it might take a while to figure it out. You might not know right off the bat.
It does. I always tell people this is, I use a simple 5-star ranking system. Everyone understands 5 stars and you know what a 5-star experience is versus a 1-star experience, right? And so I always say give it your best shot. Now, when I teach and I workshop and I do all these trainings, I teach you my formula of how I separate a 5-star from a 1-star. I always say though, these are your relationships. There's no right or wrong way to do this. But if you don't have some kind of understanding, especially in business, like if we take it in a business direction, if you don't have some kind of understanding of the level of relationship that you have with the various different people in your so-called database, sphere, network, whatever you want to call it, then you don't know how to intentionally invest in those relationships either.
This is why our viewers, our subscribers, and the people that have been invited in or have joined us for the first time or the repeats come, because this is just gold. Barb, we're going to put your profile in the show notes, and we're going to have everybody be able to learn more about you as a keynote speaker. I know at heart you're a trainer. You also are a podcast host. Apart from being a keynote speaker, you consider yourself, not only a trainer, as I said, but an educator and obsessed with relationships. You're, a proud mother. We're going to talk about your son, a mother, a wife, and a coffee lover. But I want to weave all that in, but I want to get back to something that you said earlier and put a little bit of a spotlight on it. You said taking it for granted,
Mhm.
relationships.
Yeah.
When you're younger, I just was with my twin fifth graders on their field trip for the end of the school year. And it was fantastic. They went on a boat, basically from the school. We lived near water. They went out to the marsh. They found shark teeth. They came back. I was just observing them. There were all little groups. Today we call them cohorts. They're basically groups of kids. Some were moving in and out of groups. They went and had lunch. There was a water fountain type of thing that they were playing under. But at 11, 10, fifth grade, they're not consciously going, I'm taking for granted this, but it's built in. I'll land this plane in a minute. Stay with me. You were an only child, and you didn't have that built in your home. You had to instinctively, whether, at 10, you were like, I'm an only child. I need to foment some relationships and, extend myself and be open and take risks. That's how you were formed. Connect the dots there between taking it for granted, your kind of past, your family history as an only child, and how you've landed on the importance of relationships.
I love this question because it really makes me, right, as a thought leader, dig deep into, because, as thought leaders and as speakers, we all have this message on our heart to share. But sometimes we have to question why. Like, why are we so passionate about this message? And so many of us go back to our credibility statements and what we've done in our previous lives and all the things, right? When I was asked this question recently, it caused me to really reflect on, why do I care so much about relationships? Why are relationships the most important thing in my life? And it really goes back to that childhood you talk about. And I was an only child, and I grew up in the 80s. And so I was the token latchkey kid. And for those of you that are listening that don't know what a latchkey kid was, that was the name we gave kids that went home to an empty house every day after school. Both parents, dual income household, worked outside of the home. My parents both worked in, 30, 45 minutes away from home, worked till the traditional old school 5 or 6 o'clock every day, and weren't home until probably about 7. And so I had to go home every day to an empty home, heat up my mac and cheese, and sit by myself. There's no cell phones. There's no social media. There's no, frankly, even necessarily a way to call your friends, because we had one phone line households and your parents wouldn't let you talk on the phone. And I'm digressing into what the 80s were like. But if you grew up in the 80s, you get what I'm saying. And so I would plot
Yeah,
myself.
but it's important. It's part of the origin story. And we can do a separate podcast about, the psychology of it, or, the pathology of it. And there's nothing wrong or to judge, but it's part of your origin. It's the fuel that created who you are. So, to paint the picture, I too, I'm a little bit older than you, but yeah, I have memories at 13 and 12 calling my mom and tell me how to preheat the oven and put the
Yeah.
chicken in here and get the salt. And
Yeah.
so, I'm
Yeah.
right with you.
It was spending for yourself. But really, where the loneliness capacity connects with me is being that only child, sitting at home by myself, waiting for a friend to call, waiting for someone to invite me over, waiting and watching the clock. And like, no, all joking aside, is it 3 o'clock? Is Oprah on yet? Because
Yeah.
that's what I looked forward to every day
Yeah.
as a kid, right? So like, but sitting around lonely in my own thoughts, in my own space, and then knowing what it felt like when a friend did call or a mom called and said, "Hey, can you come over and play with Amy?" That was like magic to me.
Yeah.
And it gave me this energy and these endorphins and this feeling of, I'm wanted. I
Mm.
feel connected,
Mm.
versus sitting at home, lonely, making my own dinner, eating dinner in my bedroom, and all those things that come with loneliness. So I think, to your point, Seth, I know what loneliness feels like. And so I also know the power of human connection and relationships and how that makes you feel, and then how it shows up in your life. And then it
Yeah.
just, it grew from there.
It's a real powerful source. And again, it is my podcast, and you're the esteemed invited guest. I don't want to make this all about me, but as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking I have 3 daughters, a set of twins, and one of them is quite timid and inhibited. And they're going away to summer camp this summer. This is her first year. The other daughters have gone for years. And it's a really big deal. And we had the call with the director, who the director knows her because every summer we would drop off her twin sister. And he asked her, "What are friends to you?" This is a young girl who's bilingual, learning a third language, reads music, is completely inhibited, very, very economical with her words. And she didn't hesitate. She said, "Everything." And I was like on the Zoom next to her, and I was like, wow, that I was recalling her answer with what you were telling me about waiting for the call. Friends for her are everything. I mean, long division, throw it out the window. It's friends.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward. Thank you for indulging me on that share. I got a little bit of chills there, because
I
it's
love
so
it.
important. It's so important. There are the 5 stars. I can relate to that, and relationships. And, you can, in your breakout sessions or your trainings that you do, maybe we can get into, there's acquaintances, and there's different levels and different textures of friends and everything like that. Connected in real time today on the court of life, how this applies, because these are, we're talking in concepts. Your son, who you're quite proud of, that was an elite performing athlete, baseball player, is finding his footing in the professional world. And I think that there's a valuable lesson in the anecdote of, how he was able to grab the attention and get a job that, dare I say, is a dream job or something that he's really excited about. Connect the dots there.
Yeah. So, my son's journey as a kid, he's always been that charismatic kid that connected with everybody. He's always been that kid who had a natural born tenacity for treating people like humans and not being clicky and not being I'm too cool for you. I remember in middle school specifically, he got involved in the Best Buddies program, which is where the special needs children get paired up with mainstream kids, and he just cared about people and always smiled and said hello and just acknowledged everybody, and he's just always understood the power
Could
of
you
connection.
could you recall any again, not to get on the on the therapist couch, but because I grew up in the same house as my brother, right next door in the room next door, and we couldn't be more polar opposites. Is there something, I don't want to say an incident, is something about his natural character that hasn't be that way, or
I That's a really, really great question, and I there's so many things. I think the biggest thing about Chris is he doesn't take himself too seriously. He makes fun of himself. Like I say, he cracks himself up, and I think because of that, he's a truly humble kid who's like, it's not all about me, that
Mm,
it's about others. And I think what happened is he saw his ability to do that give him opportunity in life,
mm,
getting out of trouble with teachers, getting. I remember distinctly one day he had a Saturday detention, and I got a text message from a teacher friend who knew the teacher who was running detention, and he convinced the teacher who was running detention to let them all go outside and play dodgeball. Things like that. Just he knows how to use his natural born ability of connection to connect with others and then leverage it to see it actually benefit his life, right? But treating other people truly like a human. And so, through his high school career, very talented baseball player, was drafted very high in the 2015 draft, was paid a very large amount of money to go play a man's game, right? To go play professional baseball. And he lived that career through a myriad of injuries, which is a whole nother podcast in its own on resilience and setbacks and all those things. But through that period of professional baseball, he did the same thing he's done his whole life, which is treat everybody like a human, be nice to everybody, be everybody's friend, connect with everybody. I even joke from the ticket takers to the concession stands to the mascots, everybody. And so, fast forward when he had to retire at a very young age, he retired at the age of 25. And he decided immediately to take an opportunity to go into professional baseball representation as a Major League Baseball certified player agent. And within a couple of years, he had 2 World Series champions under his representation. And people always ask, how'd he do it? And what I know you're asking, that I promise I'm going to land my plane, is that he built the relationships before he ever needed them. And I think that's the power of relationship building. It's treating people like humans that you actually care about and
yeah,
investing them in a way that then when you do need to leverage that relationship for something that benefits you,
yeah.
you can. You have the permission. And that's really what he did. He didn't come into professional baseball representation with no experience, no knowledge, no expertise. Those things are all true. But he brought with him a decade of relationships forged in trust.
Yeah.
And that has propelled his career to your point where he's just gotten a huge new opportunity and a brand new job with one of the biggest agencies in the world. And they came after him, not necessarily came after him, but they were attracted to him because of his relationships.
It just strikes me, we can find a million phrases or cliches or quotes, but I was taught early on it's much more powerful and important to be interested
Hmm.
than interesting. And it
Correct.
sounds like he's kind of got that woven into him on the cellular level.
Correct. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because it's something that I find when I've had to really ask myself the question, why am I so good at relationships? Like, why does it come easy to me? What is it? Because Seth, to your point, I have to reflect back in my history and like in my professional life, every community I've belonged to, in coaching communities, the real estate community, now in the speaking community, every time I come into a community within a few months, within 6 months, I'm everybody's best friend. And it's like history repeats itself. And I've got to look back and go, because I used to just say, oh, well, I'm just good at it. But no, there's more to it than that. And
Yeah.
what you just said is so true, because what I find myself doing over and over again that I didn't realize was such a principle and a foundation of why I have the success I do. It's because 9 out of 10 times I am trying to turn the conversation always onto someone else. Right? They're asking about me and it's like, okay, enough about me. And I'm always turning it around to curiosity. I call it curiosity. When you come from curiosity, it's amazing what you will learn. And it's amazing how quickly you can deepen a relationship and show someone you care and be connected to them when you come from that place of curiosity.
Yeah, and I will say this, being connected and having this interest and being curious, we our listeners, first of all, this is really great. If you could share in the comments where you've been able to establish a relationship that has surprised you way later on down the road and been able to benefit or serve others because of that relationship that you planted seeds on way before a harvesting moment happened. Just share in the in the comments, like us again, love us. Really appreciate you being in this conversation. When you put the focus on others, whether it's conscious or not, we've learned on this podcast on several other episodes with many guests, when you have your purpose out there on others, so it's not relationships, what can I get, what can I acquire, what can I attain, how is this going to serve me, how can I step up on the ladder, which does exist. And maybe people do that because they don't know any better, and maybe I'm still doing it because it's hidden from my view and I'm unconscious, it just sounds and looks nicer. But the fact is, the results speak. So here is your son who dedicated himself to baseball, was drafted, got a bonus, signing bonus, injuries, which is, pretty typical. We've had many baseball players on this podcast in your son's shoes that were drafted and played AAA, and lefty pitcher on his way, really to the top, and had two surgeries. And that experience of putting your purpose and your focus on others, which will lower that anxiety, lower that stress, and really, have you have a more enjoyable experience, is just so important. You find that when you're on the keynote stage, no?
Oh, 1,000%. I believe that my job is to build a relationship with every person in every chair in that room, right? My job is to impact their lives. My job is to pour into them. It is not about us when we step on that stage. And I think that it definitely differentiates the keynote speakers who are up there speaking for a fee or speaking to impact someone's life. And you can tell. I mean, those of us that do it every day, and from watching, I can't even imagine how many keynotes you've watched. You can just tell.
Many, many.
And the thing that always comes across when the feedback I get is passion, energy, and I felt like you were only talking to me. And my mindset is, if I can change just one life in that room, then I did my job. And I know it's more than one life, but that's always my focus, is I'm going to find one person in that room that needs to hear this message, that needs to go change their life or their business, that needs more confidence in themselves, or needs to go figure out the power and systematic way to build relationships with others so that they can actually feel good about who they are and what they do for a living. Then I
Yeah,
did my job. And you're right.
yeah,
If it's about others, if it's about the people you're serving, every time you make it about your transaction, every time you make it about your commission check, your sale, your benefit, you lose the relationship.
yeah. The higher purpose there is definitely a guiding principle. Barb, you get up on stage and you stand and ground yourself in, I want to connect with everybody. I want to make a meaningful impact. There are those who are listening, who are watching, who have subscribed, that say one is enough, two is enough. So it's not a one size cookie cutter fits all type of relationship with the idea of relationships. That is to say, everybody's going to kind of find their path and footing. The results speak. If you feel connected and it's one or two people, great. If you need more, even better. And then if you're on the indexing on the 1 through 5 star system, what works for you. But how can one know what would be an indicator that you've seen in your trainings, in your keynotes, in your daily life where you go into a new community and within a year you're, BFFs with everybody? What are some of the things that might not be obvious for people that go, oh, this is something that is a fruit of a relationship, whether it's 1 star, 5 star. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. So I think what you're looking for is, and how do you know that you've actually built these real relationships in the room, right? Like, how do you know that you've really connected with others? And I don't, for everybody, it's going to be different, right? Because
Yeah.
like I know because I've studied this so much and I've been in it so much and I've built multiple businesses this way. I can tell when I have a deep connection with somebody or a surface level. How was your flight? When did you get here? All the, boring questions we ask each other at a network
I call that the Chamber of Commerce questions.
drives me crazy, right?
How was
Versus
the traffic? How was the
correct,
parking?
correct. Versus somebody that walks up to me and specifically highlights something I just shared on social media or something I posted last week, or hey, how's your son doing? How's his new job? You've got to understand that if you truly are pouring into others and coming from curiosity, guess what naturally happens? They typically become curious back, right? And relationships are a two-way street. They can't be a one-way street. And so when you pour into somebody, you're going to know the level of relationship you have with somebody based on how they pour back into you, right? And how do they approach you? And I think in these communities, that's what I've really been able to develop, is where people truly know me and we truly are connected. And we're more than just where you and I met through Impact 11. We're more than just Impact 11 members standing outside at a networking mixer. We're actually friends. And so these are things that you have to judge for yourself. There is no perfect formula, there's no perfect system, but I can tell you the number one key to making it happen is that you truly invest in these relationships. And, I've had some people say to me, you say a system, you say like it has to be a system. And that sounds transactional. And no, it's not. It's called you're human. And if you don't invest in specific relationships in a strategic way that you actually care about, they'll drift away. And
Yeah.
drift is the number one killer of all relationships, right? It's that proximity principle. It's the law of propinquity that I talk about. All of those things are scientifically proven. And so how do you invest in a relationship in a way systematically that ensures that you stay in constant connection and constant touch with the people that you really care about? I go back to the beginning of no one's purposely not having good relationships. They're not having good relationships because they're not being intentional about it. And when you're intentional about it, that's when everything changes.
And to be intentional about it, if it's not working, you have to be aware of, that it's not, there's no juice, there's no spark, there's no affinity.
Correct.
And
And
it
that
takes
happens. That happens. I am not best friends with everybody I meet. Let's be clear about
yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
definitely have. I definitely am not best friends with every human I ever meet. You
No, as
definitely
you said, it
know.
would be impossible and it would be a race to the bottom. It would be a race to the mean and everybody would all be kind of very homogenous. I think that, in other cultures, they say, hey, friend, and I've never liked that, or some keynote speakers from the stage, friends, let me tell you, to me, it's too familiar. I might be a little bit too literal with words and language. So I have a different sensibility to it. I think one of the overarching ideas here is that it takes work and it takes effort. And whether you're averse to a structure or averse to a system or averse to 7 steps or whatever it is, I know you have build, you have program, and we're going to put all that stuff in all your work in the show notes. But it takes work. It's like anything, and it's hard. It's hard to write a book. It's hard to give a keynote speech. It's hard to sustain and maintain and expand relationships.
It is
It's hard to
hard.
run a podcast. It's these things take.
Really.
No, but really, no.
It did.
Look, it takes time. With my team, who's amazing, we're over 120 episodes. It doesn't happen by
Yeah.
accident or taking it for granted. You have to be, your word was, intentional about it. And if you need a structure and you need to be a little bit more matter of fact about it, so be it, with relationships as well.
I would say I think where I help people the most is awakening them to the power of making them a priority, right? So, like, if you think about your calendar and you think about everything that goes on it, right? I always say, show me your calendar and I'll tell you where your priorities are. I'm a huge priority management person and I'm a huge calendaring person. I'm a sales girl. You got to lead generate. You got to be doing your outbounds. You got to be doing your follow up, your pipeline. All of those things are so critically important. But I'm telling you, the number one thing you're missing on your calendar every day is investing in your relationships. And
Mhm.
if you just make that one move in your business and you put that on your calendar every day and you spend just 1 hour reaching out and connecting, checking in on people, that's where my ranking system comes in. That's where you start with the fives and you work your way down and
Right.
all the things. But if you just take
Right.
1 hour a day to intentionally and thoughtfully check in and connect with the people that are important to you, take Dunbar's 150, take whatever you want, and you make that a daily habit, you will watch your life and business systematically change, period.
Yeah. That's great. That's great stuff. For our listeners, replay that if you need to hear it again, and work that into your systems, your body, your structure, your agenda, your calendars. That's really, really great. Well, Barb, I think we're gonna land our plane on that note, on a high note. Just thank you for sharing, about being a latchkey kid, the pride of your son, and the really hard and important work that you're doing, as it connects relationships, and the incredible impact that it has on the world. Just thank you so much for being a guest on our podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
You're very welcome. And to our viewers, our guests, our subscribers that are listening in, thank you. Come back next time and we'll see you then.